Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing the parts of the heart and how blood flows through it. First we're going to go over some terminology. So the left side of the heart, which is on this side, has oxygenated blood. You can remember this by thinking of the mnemonic lots of oxygen for left. The right side of the heart is going to have deoxygenated blood or no oxygen. And you're probably wondering, why is the right side of the heart on my left side? Well, if you're looking at the patient's point of view, you're going to see that it's flip-flopped. So you need to remember that while remembering the parts of the heart. First, let's start off with the deoxygenated part. First, the top two chambers are called the atrias. There are two types of atrias, which go into the right atrium and the left atrium. These bottom chambers are called the ventricles, one on each side. The one on the right is called the right ventricle. And for the left, similarly, we have the left atrium and the left ventricle. Now, moving on to the vena cavas. This is called the superior vena cava because it brings blood to the superior part of the body, meaning the arms and your head. Superior vena cava. Remember, vena cava, you can remember this by veins. Veins is deoxygenated. Next, we have the inferior vena cava, which moves blood to the inferior parts of your body, which are everything except the head and arms. So, inferior vena cava. Next, we have this big artery, which is called the pulmonary artery. This is a really important artery because it brings deoxygenated blood to your lungs to get reoxygenated and back in to the heart, which then pumps it to the rest of the body. So as we can see, it has two arteries. The one on the left brings blood to the left side of the lungs, and the one on the right brings blood to the right side of the lungs. Now moving on to the oxygenated parts of the heart, we have this big artery, which is the most important one. It's called the aorta. This aorta pumps blood to the whole body system. As we can see, it is the biggest artery in the whole body, and it expands just behind the heart to right here. This part is the descending aorta, which pumps blood to your lower extremities. And this is the ascending aorta, which pumps blood to your upper extremities, similar to the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. And lastly, we have the pulmonary veins, which are these two. These are what bring the oxygenated blood from the lungs back into the heart. Now that we have all the terms covered, we're going to move on to the valves of the heart. This allows the blood to pump in one direction because we don't want blood pumping all over in different directions because that will lead to an inconsistent heartbeat. So we want the blood flowing all in one way. These are why these valves are called one-way valves. Right here, this is the tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve, which it'll pump blood from the right atrium. The valve will open, moving it to the right ventricle. Next, we have the pulmonary valve, which is right here. It's easy to remember because the pulmonary valve is the valve to the pulmonary artery. Next, blood is then exited to the right and left lungs, and then it's brought back in to the pulmonary veins. So blood then enters the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, and then it goes into the mitral valve, which then goes into the left atrium. Then the aortic valve, which, like the pulmonary valve, aortic valve opens to the aorta. A similar terminology that you can use to help remember all these valves is toilet, paper, my asset. So toilet, paper, my asset. You can remember the pulmonary vein and the aortic valve very easily because the pulmonary valve is the opening to the pulmonary artery and the aortic valve is the opening to the aorta. Now that we have the parts of the heart covered, we're going to explain how blood flows through it. Let's start off with the deoxygenated heart, as known as the right side. From the lower and upper extremities, blood enters from the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, and it builds up in the right atrium. Once the right atrium is full of blood, then it creates a pressure on the tricuspid valve, leading it to open into the right ventricle. Once that right ventricle is opened and full, it opens the pulmonary valve, which leads all the pressure moving in to the pulmonary artery to the left and right lungs. Then, when you breathe in oxygen attaches to your red blood cells and then it moves back to the heart. Once it moves back to the heart, it enters the pulmonary veins. Enters these two veins right here. It enters into the left atrium. Again, when there's enough pressure, it opens the mitral valve, leaking all the blood to the left ventricle. Once the left ventricle is full, it opens the aortic valve, leading to the aorta, and the blood gets sent to the rest of the body. Now, how does the blood flow? Well, that all happens thanks to the nodes, which is an electrical system in your heart that allows it to contract or depolarize and repolarize. So here are two terms that you need to know. Depolarization means the contraction of the heart. Repolarization means the relaxation of the heart. So re. And you're probably wondering why I put this line under here, because this is what blood pressure detects. So depolarization, or when your heart is contract, is the systole pressure, and the repolarization, or when your heart relax, is the diastole pressure. So I'm going to break this down simple. In the right atrium, you have something called an SA node. And this SA node had a bunch of little fibers that send electrical pulses to the heart. It sends these electrical pulses in the intramodal pathways, which then lead to the AV node, which is right here, between the pulmonary artery and the aorta. Once it's delivered, these electrical fibers, it then gets sent across something called the Boltzmann bundles. Because how is the left side of the heart supposed to receive these electrical symptoms? If it weren't for these Boltzmann bundles, then your right side would be the only side contracting, and you need your whole heart to work in order for it to function. Therefore, the Boltzmann bundles are like a bridge from the right atrium all the way to the left atrium. So your Boltzmann bundles. This leads the heart to contract. Then, once it receives at the left atrium, you have a bunch of left anterior fascicles, which are right here on the heart. And it moves down and it sends signals through neurotransmitters telling the heart to contract. And it goes all the way here through the bundle of His, moves to the left ventricle, and that's when your heart contracts. Now, that is how blood flows through the body, the parts of the heart, and how your heart contracts. A simple and short summary: deoxygenated blood or no oxygenated blood moves in from the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava. It then enters the right atrium. When enough blood is inside, it opens the tricuspid valve, which leads to your right ventricle. It then moves to the pulmonary valve, to the pulmonary artery, which goes to the left and right parts of your lungs. Once it's oxygenated, it'll move into the pulmonary valve, which then gets sent to the left atrium through the mitral valve, left ventricle, aortic valve, aorta, and it gets sent to the rest of your body so it can become oxygenated.